I decided that in the month of September, I would challenge myself to watch the 100 movies that I had not previously seen before, with the only real criteria being that I had not seen it before. I barely managed to watch them, but I decided to rank every single one of the movies I watched. But since I don't want to talk about 100 movies that have very little to nothing in common, I'm probably just going to say a one-liner review for each movie. That was the same one that I put in my Letterboxd review. But anyways, let's get into the ranking. In 100th place is Scary Movie 5. The 97th movie I watched was one of the worst movies I've ever seen. It's down there with Megamind 2 as not only one of the worst sequels, but also just worst movies ever made. 0 out of 10. In 99th place is Scary Movie 2. The 83rd movie I watched, which is another Scary Movie film, is also one of the worst sequels ever made. It is one of the biggest wastes of talent I've ever seen, and I have no idea how anyone above the age of 4 can find any of it funny. 0 out of 10. In 98th place is The Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn Part 2. The 73rd movie I watched was the final entry in the Twilight series, and I had never been happier to finish a franchise. 1 out of 10. In 97th place is Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn Part 1. The 70th movie I watched was another absolutely miserable Twilight movie that for whatever reason they decided to split into 2 parts and make me suffer even more. 1 out of 10. In 96th place is the Twilight Saga Eclipse, the 68th movie I watched. Yep, all these Twilight movies are just being bundled together because they are all basically equal levels of terribleness. 1 out of 10. In 95 is Twilight Saga New Moon, the 49th movie I watched. Despite giving all these movies extremely low ratings, it is also one of the best franchises I've ever seen because of how funny they all were. 1 out of 10. In 94th place is Twilight, the 46th movie I watched. It's the best of the series, but still one of the worst things I've ever seen. 1 out of 10. In 93rd place is Scary Movie, the 67th movie I watched. Given that this movie is a parody of Scream, which is already a parody that uses a whole bunch of clever jokes, Scary Movie can't use said clever jokes since they were all pushed and used in Scream. So Scary Movie just resorts to terrible jokes like dated pop culture references, ableism, and unfunny sex jokes. At least there were a whole 2 jokes in the movie that I actually laughed at. 2 out of 10. 92nd place is Family Guy, It's a Trap, the 92nd film I watched. The other 2 Family Guy Star Wars things at least had some small laughs out of me, but this one was just boring. 3 out of 10. In 91st place is The Big Short, the 30th movie I watched. I did not understand a single line of dialogue in this film. 4 out of 10. In 90th place is The Silence of the Lambs, the 34th film I watched. I really wanted to like this, but for the first 2/3 I just couldn't get into it, unless it involved Hopkins, which is surprisingly little. But then the third act is actually super tense and really good, and I liked that bit a lot. 4 out of 10. In 89th place is Scary Movie 3, the 84th movie I watched. This one still wasn't very good, but it's a masterpiece compared to 1, 2 and 5, because this one actually has some good jokes in it. 5 out of 10. In 88th place is Family Guy Blue Harvest, the 90th movie I watched. It may be good, but it's no Phineas and Ferb Star Wars special. 5 out of 10. In 87th place is Family Guy's Something Something Dark Side, the 91st movie I watched. I swear I had to be intentional with the amount of times a genuinely great joke appears in the thing just for the next one to be completely unfunny. 5 out of 10. In 86th place is Herbie Goes Bananas, the 43rd movie I watched. Herbie kidnaps a child, not clickbait. 5 out of 10. In 85th place is Wolves, the 80th movie I watched. I will almost certainly forget everything about this, but it was certainly fun while it lasted. 5 out of 10. In 84th place is Layer Cake, the 38th movie I watched. If I learned one thing from giving both this and Snatch a 5 out of 10 in within 1 week of each other, it's that maybe I'm not a big fan of British crime films. 5 out of 10. In 83rd place was Jonah from Tonga, the 89th movie I watched. While I loved Lily's other shows, I thought this one was a lot weaker because unlike his earlier shows, this one just focuses on the one character instead of the large group of characters which was the main charm of the others. 5 out of 10. In 82nd place is Snatch, the 15th movie I watched. Brad Pitt in Snatch walked so Gambit could run. 5 out of 10. In 81st place is Thelma, the 44th movie I watched. It certainly got its charm, but it's also kind of forgettable. 5 out of 10. In 80th place is Scary Movie 4, the 95th movie I watched. I hate that I kind of liked this one. 6 out of 10. In 79th place, Stand By Me, the 20th movie I watched. This is just a day in the life of Logan Paul as a child. 6 out of 10. In 78th place is Uncut Gems, the 88th movie I watched. It was very weird seeing Sandler in a non-comedic role, and I'm honestly not a big fan. 6 out of 10. In 77th place is Beetlejuice, the 21st movie I watched. I haven't really liked a Tim Burton movie in nearly 30 years, and this one hasn't really changed my mind. 6 out of 10. In 76th place is Bad Boys, the 56th film I watched. Surprisingly, a small amount of explosions for a Michael Bay movie. 6 out of 10. In 75th place is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, the 6th movie I watched. This is the last movie I'd expected to be made by the guy who did Monty Python and the Holy Grail. 6 out of 10. In 74th place is Oh Brother Where Art Thou, the 11th movie I watched. A Man of Constant Sorrow is unironically a banger. My number one Spotify rap of the year. On God. 6 out of 10. In 73rd place, Bad Boys Ride or Die, the 59th movie I watched. Whoever had the idea to resurrect the Bad Boys series after 20 years and make it actually really good deserves a raise. 6 out of 10. In 72nd place is The Belko Experiment, the 62nd movie I watched. Definitely the weakest movie I've seen that was written by James Gunn and stars his brother, David Desmalchin, and Michael Rooker, and also features explosive placing the characters next to get triggered when they do something wrong. 6 out of 10. In 71st place is Midsummer, the 93rd movie I watched. The new Mr. Beast video goes crazy. 6 out of 10. In 70th place is Ja'mie Private School Girl, the 81st movie I watched. It suffers a lot of the same problems as Jonah from Tonga, but Ja'mie is just a generally funnier character. 6 out of 10. In 69th place is Raising Arizona, the 72nd movie I watched. As someone who has 7 cousins under the age of 7, I can confirm that this is what it is like. 6 out of 10. In 68th place is Herbie Rides Again, the 41st movie I watched. I guess the weirdest dream sequence in a Disney movie is no longer Dumbo's. 6 out of 10. In 67th place is The Love Bug, the 40th movie I watched. This is a movie intended for children, which also features a sentient car attempted to commit suicide. 6 out of 10. In 66th place is The Mist, the 99th movie I watched. It feels weird seeing Darabont do a horror movie, since I'm so used to him doing Shawshank or Green Mile, but as it is, it's a pretty solid horror flick. 6 out of 10. In 65th place is Kung Fu Hustle, the 76th movie I watched. This is what Kung Fu Panda 4 should have been. 6 out of 10. In 64th place is They Live, the 27th movie I watched. Definitely a good movie, but I wish the fight scene between the main guy and Keith David went on for a bit longer. 6 out of 10. In 63rd place is Heat, the 51st movie I watched. Shout out to the Girl Fathers for their love of Al Pacino, and who were also the main inspirations for my viewing of this. 6 out of 10. In 62nd place is The Lone Ranger, the 32nd movie I watched. I watched this the same day that all the Dave Grohl stuff came out, and every time Armie Hammer was on screen, all I thought was the horrible actions he's done, and all I could think was maybe Dave isn't that bad after all. 6 out of 10. In 61st place is The Long Goodbye, the 94th movie I watched. I'm sorry, but every time Elliot Gould spoke, all I could hear was Ross and Monica's dad. 7 out of 10. In 60th place is Road to Perdition, the 23rd movie I watched. Somehow my first driving lesson went even worse than the one Michael's son had. 7 out of 10. In 59th place is Bad Boys for Life, the 58th movie I watched. Of all the Legacy sequels to be actually great, why was it the Bad Boys one? 7 out of 10. In 58th place is Ex Machina, the 16th movie I watched. This is almost like a sci-fi version of The Shining, the sci-fining, if you will. 7 out of 10. In 57th place is The Jerk, the 28th movie I watched. Definitely funny, but I feel like this one would be better for people who grew up with it. 7 out of 10. In 56th place is Dragged Across Concrete, the 7th movie I watched. Very tense and thrilling, but also way longer than it needs to be, leaning it to be Zala's weakest, although I'm very excited for his next project, if he ever makes it. 7 out of 10. In 55th place is Kung Pao Enter the Fist, the 60th movie I watched. This is the original YTP. 7 out of 10. In 54th place is 127 Hours, the 96th movie I watched. Ever seen that one bit in Deadpool? Spoiler alert, 7 out of 10. In 53rd place is Lady Bird, the 77th movie I watched. I watched this on the same day as some of my friends' graduation to help me feel better. It did not work. 7 out of 10. 52nd place is Air Force One, the 35th movie I watched. Visual design is my passion. 7 out of 10. In 51st place is Escape from Alcatraz, the 10th movie I watched. My review for this on Letterboxd was, somehow this was my first Clint Eastwood film. Definitely will be watching more of his classics throughout the month. I'd in fact not watch any more Clint Eastwood films throughout the month. 7 out of 10. In 50th place is The Departed, the 86th film I watched. Certainly great, but also a little disappointing. Probably my least favourite Scorsese film I've seen. 7 out of 10. In 49th place is Collateral, the 31st movie I watched. If I had a nickel for every Jamie Foxx movie which featured him playing a character named Max and the year it released was ended with the number 4, I'd have 2 nickels. 7 out of 10. In 48th place is Bad Boys 2, the 57th movie I watched. I can't believe they made an entire movie based off the movie Danny from Hot Fuzz loves. 7 out of 10. In 47th place is We Can Be Heroes, the 71st film I watched. Definitely one of the best Australian classics out there. 7 out of 10. In 46th place is El Mariachi, the 3rd movie I watched. I love seeing all the Rodriguez flares take shape in this. Incredible what they managed to achieve with such a small budget. 7 out of 10. In 45th place is Transformers 1, the 78th film I watched. It's not blowing anyone away, but it's a fun enough Transformers movie that's at least better than most of the Bay films. 7 out of 10. In 44th place is 300, the 26th movie I watched. No way the Minecraft movie got leaked nearly 20 years early. 7 out of 10. In 43rd place is The Devil Wears Prada, the 54th movie I watched. Midas Praxia could never. 7 out of 10. In 42nd place is Legally Blonde, the 66th movie I watched. I needed something to cheer me up after watching Dead Poet Society. Safe to say it worked. 7 out of 10. In 41st place is My Cousin Vinny, the 37th movie I watched. I want Joe Pesci's My Lawyer. 7 out of 10. In 40th place is Shoot 'Em Up, the 55th movie I watched. Any movie that opens with a guy shoving a carrot through someone's mouth and then immediately plays Territorial Piercings by Nirvana is automatically approved in my books. 7 out of 10. In 39th place is Train to Busan, the 63rd movie I watched. Average train experience in Sydney. 8 out of 10. In 38th place is Night of the Living Dead, the 69th movie I watched. For whatever reason, Prime Video had the whole thing in this crappy colorized version, and the whole thing looked like crap. But other than that, it's definitely one of the best horror movies ever made. 8 out of 10. In 37th place is Angry Boys, the 79th movie I watched. Smack My Elbow is unironically the best piece of music ever conceived. 8 out of 10. In 36th place is Summer Heights High, the 74th movie I watched. This is the truest depiction of an Aussie high school out there in fiction. 8 out of 10. In 35th place is Scarface, the 29th movie I watched. I just know the girl fathers are proud of this placement. 8 out of 10. In 34th place is Life of Brian, the 87th movie I watched. When it's funny, it's really funny. However, it never quite reaches the heights of the Holy Grail. 8 out of 10. In 33rd place is Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo, the 42nd movie I watched. Herbie and Giselle walked so Wally and Eve could run. 8 out of 10. In 32nd place is Joker, the first movie I watched. Weird to think this is where my journey began, but it was definitely a good start. 8 out of 10. In 31st place is Zodiac, the 47th movie I watched. One of my least favourite types of humour is people seeing MCU actors in non-MCU movies and calling them by the superhero name, but I also couldn't stop saying, whoa, Iron Man, Hulk and Mysterio helping with the Zodiac Killer. 8 out of 10. In 30th place is Black Swan, the 8th movie I watched. For the first third I wasn't really getting into it. I thought it was a fairly standard drama about a topic I wasn't particularly interested in. But then the second act started to get a lot more interesting and I started getting really into it, even if it wasn't the most unique film in the world. And then the third act hit and it was generally one of the best things I've ever seen. Moral of the story, don't judge a film by its first act. 8 out of 10. In 29th place is Sunshine, the 24th movie I watched. Sunshine walked so Interstellar could run. 8 out of 10. In 28th place is Watchmen, the 50th movie I watched. Definitely gives off heavy The Boys vibes, but I'm not complaining. 8 out of 10. In 27th place is Signs, the 85th movie I watched. It's a whole lot better than Scary Movie 3. 8 out of 10. In 26th place is Sinister, the 64th movie I watched. Bagul was just a really big America's Funniest Home Videos fan. 8 out of 10. In 25th place is American Beauty, the 19th movie I watched. There are some movies I praise for being ahead of their time. This is not one of them. 8 out of 10. In 24th place is Ghost in the Shell, the 48th movie I watched. I used to be obsessed with this one montage on YouTube, and I always thought the background music was pretty cool, but didn't know what it was. As soon as they played the main theme to this, I got a hit with a wave of nostalgia. 8 out of 10. In 23rd place is Election, the 53rd movie I watched. Definitely my favourite 99 movie, which features a main actor who's actually terrible in real life, an adult falling in love with a blonde high school girl, and someone cheating on their partner. 8 out of 10. In the 22nd place is Armageddon, the 45th movie I watched. Michael Bay is the ultimate guilty pleasure director. 8 out of 10. In 21st place is The Castle, the 5th movie I watched. Please Rise for the National Anthem plays this movie in full. 8 out of 10. In 20th place is Hot Rod, the 17th movie I watched. I am convinced that this is the greatest movie ever made. 8 out of 10. In 19th place is Shutter Island, the 19th movie I watched. You know it's going to be a good movie when it released in 2010, stars Leonardo DiCaprio, has a trippy plot, and also has a weird scene regarding a beachside. 8 out of 10. In 18th place is Dazed and Confused, the 14th movie I watched. I can definitely see why someone has watched this nearly 100 times. Also, I hope this is now the end of my high school goes. 8 out of 10. In 17th place is Dead Poets Society, the 65th movie I watched. Before I started watching, I told two of my friends that I was going to watch it, and they warned me about how sad it was, and I basically scoffed at throughout most of the movie. I was laughing going, this movie isn't sad at all. They were wrong. And then those last 20 minutes happened. 8 out of 10. In 16th place is Smiley Face, the 52nd movie I watched. I'd probably act like that too if someone tried stealing my bed. 8 out of 10. In 15th place is The Hunchback of Notre Dame, the 15th movie I watched. Apparently everyone hated him because of his hunch. I thought it was because he was a redhead. 9 out of 10. In 14th place is Sin City, the 33rd movie I watched. Rodriguez is absolutely a genius for being able to make both this and The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl in the same year. 9 out of 10. In 13th place is Princess Mononoke, the second movie I watched. Much appreciated watching a Ghibli film that doesn't make me feel extremely depressed, unlike Grave of the Fireflies, which I'd only watched 2 weeks prior. 9 out of 10. In 12th place is Girl Interrupted, the 82nd movie I watched. It was so good, it almost made me forget that the director of this also did my least favourite sequel of all time. 9 out of 10. In 11th place is RoboCop, the 100th movie I watched. I've never been happy for a credits of a movie to roll. Not because of this film's quality, but because I was so celebratory that I'd finally finished this freaking 100 movie month. 9 out of 10. In 10th place is The Social Network, the 18th movie I watched. Seeing Sevens in cinemas the day before this got me in a mood to watch more Fincher films that I've never seen. And I gotta say, I'm surprised it took me so long to watch this. 9 out of 10. In 9th place is Blade Runner, the 9th film I watched. One of the most glorious films I've ever seen in 4K. Hell, it's also just one of the most glorious films ever, period. 9 out of 10. In 8th place is Blade Runner 2049, the 12th movie I watched. I can absolutely see why Denis was chosen for Dune after seeing this movie. 9 out of 10. In 7th place was When Harry Met Sally, the 98th movie I watched. Easily one of the best rom-coms ever made. How did it take so long to me to finally watch it? 9 out of 10. In 6th place is Desperado, the 4th movie I watched. Compared to the first one, it looks like 10 to 15 years in between each film, when there was only 2. Insane what a bigger budget can do. 9 out of 10. In 5th place was Con Air, the 61st movie I watched. I'm a sucker for over-the-top 90s action films, and this is no exception. 9 out of 10. In 4th place is The Green Mile, the 39th movie I watched. One of the most emotionally captivating and brilliant films ever made. 9 out of 10. In 3rd place is Drive, the 13th movie I watched. This is Quentin Tarantino's Baby Driver. 9 out of 10. In 2nd place is The Wild Robot, the 75th movie I watched. One of the most gorgeous and most emotionally incredible movies ever made, and needs to be witnessed on the big screen, ASAP. 9 out of 10. In 1st place is 1917, the 36th movie I watched. One of the most mesmerizing movies I've ever seen. Easily the best non-Saving Private Ryan war film I've ever seen. 9 out of 10. So that was all 100 movies that I watched in September ranked. I'm currently binging shows throughout October and November as well. So I might do a ranking at the end of the year of all the shows that I watched in 2024. So stay tuned for that. Yeah.